of small hills that more or less define a line segment that is perpendicular to all these other ridges around here. And therefore, it provided a pretty good place to make a defensive stand in the valley. Okay, so after McCausland's raid, Grant decided, okay, got to take the bull by the horns here. And he combined several commands to create an army, which came to be called the Army of the Shenandoah. And he installed his boy, Phil Sheridan, as the head of this new army, over the objections of both Secretary Stanton and President Lincoln, who felt that Sheridan, being only 33 years old at this time, was just too young for such a big responsibility. But Grant got his way on this one, and Sheridan took command on August 6th, and with 3 instructions from Grant. Weaken Early's army. Yes, Jubal Early was the head of all the Confederate forces in the Valley at this time, and his army was called the Army of the Valley. So Sheridan had the Army of the Shenandoah, Early had the Army of the Valley. So weaken Early's army to the point where it would no longer pose such a menace to Union soil. Secondly, destroy agriculture in the valley as much as possible. And third, don't lose. Don't lose a big battle. What's going on there is, that's really about politics, because, the presidential election was coming up on November 8th, and Grant feared that yet another federal humiliation in the valley might discourage and it was a Union victory, after which Early retreated to Fisher's Hill here that we spoke of. And then, Sheridan pursued, and only 2 days later, there was another big battle, the Battle of Fisher's Hill, and which was yet another Union victory, even more decisive than the Third Battle of Winchester. After that, Early retreated all the way up to Stanton. I know it's spelled like Staunton, but it's pronounced Stanton. And Early pursued to about Harrisonburg. And then he decided, okay, now it's time to go after the agriculture. You see this yellow area in the map. Sheridan sent his cavalry throughout that area to set fire to crops standing in the field, to orchards, to barns, mills, tanneries. They would collect farm implements and burn those. And also, they drove down the valley vast herds of cattle and sheep. As far as hogs, they just slaughtered them wherever they found them. Not only did this action deplete this region of crops and the ability to make crops, but also and livestock, but also to some extent of farmers. A lot of farmers looked around and said, well, we can't make a living here anymore. And they moved down the valley. In fact, Sheridan even provided wagons for farmers and their families and some of their possessions to help move them out of here. So now what's his next move? Well, Grant, okay, so Sheridan's army was down around here. Grant wanted him to head towards Charlottesville and then follow the Virginia Central Railroad up through Gordonsville and just utterly destroy the track and whatever bridges might be there. Sheridan was a little nervous about that. He felt that, okay, if his army's down here, well, his supply line would run all the way back to Winchester. And, you know, they certainly couldn't depend on any forage in this area that they just burnt. Oh, by the way, this action against the agriculture that immediately acquired the name of the burning, which is still called by, and that happened September 26th through October 8th. Okay, so he was worried about a supply line because he had Mosby's Rangers operating up in here, and he thought they would be continually harassing his supply line. And furthermore, he was worried that if his army were down here, maybe Early would attack from the west at the same time some detachment from Lee would attack from the east. He just didn't feel that the risk-reward profile was good. So Grant said, okay, in that case, just retreat down the valley. And as you do so, make sure you burn anything you might have missed the first time. So that's what Sheridan did. He retreated and camped out near Middletown. Early pursued to about Newmarket, and you doing all right?
I'm getting you on camera.
Oh,
Oh,
don't take that
There we
out.
go.
Don't take that out of my time allotted. Yeah. Okay. So he pursued to about Newmarket, but his cavalry got about 20 miles ahead of him to this place called Tom's Brook, and there they got into a battle with some Union cavalry. This was a pure cavalry battle on October 9th, and Eric Wittenberg called the Battle of Tom Brooks, quote, the worst defeat suffered by the Southern horsemen in the entire Civil War. Okay, and it truly was a lopsided win. There were very few Union casualties. They captured over 300 prisoners, 11 guns, other supplies, and then then Early's cavalry raced back to rejoin the infantry at Newmarket. So now, into the space of just 3 weeks, Sheridan had 3 major victories in the valley. People weren't used to this, right? I mean, they were stunned. I mean, the people who lived in this area, the southern newspapers, they couldn't believe what was happening. They're used to winning battles there, right? Sometimes against superior numbers, very superior numbers. And a lot of people in Sheridan's army felt that Early was basically whipped at this point, that he wouldn't be able to mount a serious attack. However, just as Grant had told Sheridan, don't take too many chances, don't be too bold. Well, Robert E. Lee was telling Early, you better do something. Our back's up against it. You got to, even if you are taking some chances, you got to go out there. You got to attack. You got to get us a big win. And so Early moved up this way or down this way and camped on Fisher's Hill. And then on October 17th, Early sent these 2 men, this depicted here. This is John Brown Gordon, and this is Jed Hotchkiss, the cartographer. He sent them up to one of the peaks of the Massanutten Mountain, which during the Civil War had come to be known as Signal Knob. Why Signal Knob? Because guys like the signal officer would go up on there and do their thing, and communicate that way. So he sent them up there to. It was a very clear day, and they were able to see all of the federal camps and what sort of breastworks and other defensive things were built. They presumably Hotchkiss drew some maps, and they made a plan of attack. And then they came down, discussed their plan with Early, who called in some other senior officers. They all discussed the plan, they modified it somewhat, and decided to go with it. Now, is there any way to enlarge this? Is that, well, I don't know. Yeah, forget it. No. Okay. Before describing the plan, let's look at the armies involved. In this map, every rectangle like this represents a division. Is it just to zoom in on it a little?
There may be a way. Give me a second.
Well, I don't want to take too much. Oh, zoom. That's a good thing.
Considering the way you've done your slides, this might work. Hold on. No, it does not.
Oh, okay. Well, let's get back where we were then.
It does not like that.
Well, okay. All right. Forget it then. We'll just get back. I shouldn't have said anything.
Come on. Come on. Did I bump something? We shouldn't have lost our picture.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Shouldn't have said anything.
All right, if that's the worst thing you do. Let's see if we refresh it. Yes.
Okay. I got it.
Smarter than the average bear.
Okay.
And wait a minute. Let's.
Oh yeah,
No,
we
This is
gotta move it a little bit.
this is the whole manipulation.
Yeah, we gotta take it down a little.
Yeah, there it was.
Down. Okay.
Oh,
Oops.
too far.
Okay. A little. No, the other direction.
Yeah. Technical assistance.
Okay, we're good.
Yeah.
We're good. Thank you.
The
Thank
nice thing about it is wins and losses.
Okay, and it's bigger than it used to be. All right. So,
Can you start over then, please?
sure. Okay, so the Army of the Shenandoah had 4 corps. One corps of cavalry, led respectively by Custer, Merritt, and William Powell, and then 3 corps of infantry. The 6th Corps had 3 divisions. The 19th Corps had these 2. The 8th Corps had these 2. The 8th Corps was officially known as the Army of West Virginia, but led by George Crook. But at this point in time, it wasn't functioning as an army. It was just functioning as a corps within the Army of the Shenandoah. And these infantry were camped this is Cedar Creek here. And their defensive works were all facing the creek. Okay. So they felt that they could withstand an attack from a frontal attack from across the creek. They had their cavalry on the right flank to protect that. Didn't have too much to protect the left flank here, you see, because they had this Massanutten Mountain, which isn't really, you can't really see in this map, but it goes like this right up again. This is the North Fork of the Shenandoah River. See here, the South Fork, they converge around Front Royal. But anyhow, they felt that the mountain kind of anchored their left flank. That, in other words, they didn't think it would be possible for the rebels to get a large body of men from here over to there. But that was the plan. Okay. So, but anyhow, the Early's army was not divided into corps. It went straight down to divisions. There were 5 infantry divisions. They were led respectively by Gabriel Wharton, Joseph Kershaw, Gordon, Ramseur, and Pegram. There were 2 cavalry divisions, one led by Rosser and one by Lomax. So the plan was at 8:00 p.m. on the 18th, 8 p.m., these 3 divisions of infantry, Gordon's, Ramseur's, and Pegrams, were going to leave Fisher's Hill, ford the Shenandoah. It's pretty deep and cold. Some of these guys complained about this for the rest of their lives, how miserable that wading through that river was. And then walk along there was a path somewhat near the base of the Massanutten Mountains. It was on the side of the mountain near the base, and it was a difficult path. It was they could only go single file for much of it, and the footing was difficult, and it was dark. They weren't even allowed to bring canteens because the thought was that those may jingle and alert the enemy. And this was supposed to be a surprise, right? And then go all the way and then ford the river again, which apparently was even colder by the time they got there. It was 4 in the morning. 4 in the morning. It took 8 hours to walk less than 5 miles through this path. And again, a lot of it was single file. That slowed them down a lot. It was just a difficult place to walk. And then they emerged on the other side of the river. Probably all of them were across by 4:30. And the idea was they would be ready to fight at 5 a.m. Meanwhile, Wharton and Kershaw were going to leave Fisher's Hill at midnight, go down the Valley Pike here through Strasburg, and then Wharton was going to veer off to the left and ford Cedar Creek, which is a lot shallower. And around here, and Kershaw was going to go to the right and ford Cedar Creek around here. Kershaw was supposed to come up right on the left flank of, this is Joseph Thoburn. He led this division. The other division was led by Rutherford B. Hayes. Those are the two divisions of Crook. Anyhow, and they were supposed to attack also at 5. So all the infantry were supposed to attack at 5 in the morning. Furthermore, Rosser was supposed to take his cavalry up along this way and demonstrate against the Union right flank, maybe starting around 4:30 in the morning. Again, just a demonstration to make the Yankees think that the main attack was going to come on the right, when in fact it was going to come on the left. And I'm sure, as you all know, then in those days before there were radios, even if you had 2 bodies of men moving across difficult terrain and then simultaneously supposed to act, it usually didn't work out too well. I mean, even Napoleon talked about that, right? And here there were 4 bodies of men, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. And they executed it beautifully. I mean, it was just a bold plan, beautifully executed. The only thing that was changed sort of at the last minute, Kershaw got there early and decided, he got maybe 20 minutes to 5 and decided just to go ahead and attack. Okay. And they, climbed over the defensive works. And now some of Kershaw's men were killed or wounded in doing so, but not a great number. And they routed Thoburn within 20 minutes. Within 20 minutes, Thoburn's division was fleeing every which way, and they didn't participate in this battle again for the rest of the day. They left a lot of materiel behind. Some of these men were sleeping in their tents when all of a sudden the enemy came in. Okay, and others who weren't sleeping, they really didn't have time to get up and make any kind of defensive stand. And then the next to be attacked, moving up the line here, was Hayes. Now, this started around 5 in the morning. Okay, so we still had Kershaw working on the flank, but also had Gordon and Ramseur hitting him from the rear. Their defensive works were all faced the wrong direction. And so maybe they weren't sleeping because they'd been woken up by the attack on Thoburn, but they didn't really have time to make any kind of defense here. And within a half an hour, Hayes's men went the same way as Thoburn's, just every man for himself, and really we're done for the day. The next, what just happened here? I just got to pull that down a little. Okay, so the next to be attacked was the 19th Corps because they're just moving up the left. Now they had a little more time. They were able to get some men lined up here to face at least the correct direction for facing the attackers, but they were outnumbered and there was no way they were going to be able to maintain this line. And then William Emery, who was the commander of the 19th Corps, made a difficult and painful decision. He decided to sacrifice one brigade consisting of these 3 regiments. He told them, just hold this ground as long as you can, and meanwhile the rest of the army would be able to retreat in an orderly way. The rest of the corps could be retreat in an orderly way, and that's what happened. they took very heavy casualties, especially the 8th Vermont that Dale was talking about. They were the last to hold out. And in doing so, they bought maybe 10 to 15 minutes for the rest of the Corps to make a fighting retreat. So then came the 6th Corps. It was their turn to get attacked. Oops. Okay. So they formed a line, like a hook like this, because they're getting attacked in different directions here, from different directions. And the 19th Corps was lined up on their right. Well, when I say the 6th Corps lined up here, there was one exception. George Washington Getty commanded one of the divisions of the 6th Corps. There were 3 divisions. And he looked around, and this was all happening very fast, but he decided, he came to the conclusion very quickly that there's no way they're going to be able to hold this line at this point in time. So he also looked around and he saw, well, this is Middletown. And the principal cemetery of Middletown was over here on Cemetery Hill. And he decided that, he came to the conclusion very quickly that this is the most valuable piece of real estate in the entire battlefield. From Cemetery Hill, you could have guns that would overlook the Valley Pike. They could command that. He could shoot down his guns into the enemy over here. And plus, it's a place he could just make a stand while the rest of the army was going to retreat, which he was sure they were going to have to. I'm going to have to do this every time. Come on now. Oh, no, come on. There we go. This is the view Getty's men would have had from Cemetery Hill. The enemy was in these woods at this lower elevation. Oh, there's Signal Knob that we spoke of. So they basically ran up to Cemetery Hill, formed a single line of battle. That's all they could do because the crest of this hill was pretty long. And some of the men kneeled behind tombstones, some just lay down in the grass, and got ready for an attack, which came pretty soon. 2 brigades of Pegram came out of these woods, and there was still a lot of fog. Out of the fog, they didn't know anybody was on the hill. Okay, they didn't even send out skirmishers. They just marched in a battle line right into Lewis Grant's brigade of Getty, Lewis Grant's Vermonters. And when they emerged, they were about 75 yards away. And then the order was given, and Grant's men just jumped up and fired a devastating volley. And the survivors fell back. And then there was a second frontal infantry attack. This time, all of Pegram's brigade and probably most of Ramser's as well came up, and they again were repulsed with heavy losses. So then they decided that's enough with these frontal attacks. Oops. So they had a number of guns. These indicate artillery pieces, these marks here. They had a number of guns over in this area, and there was some high ground in there as well, and they directed them all towards Getty's position. Furthermore, over time, the rest of the 6th Corps had to retreat, as well as the 19th back there. So when these guys retreated, well, then that exposed Getty's right flank, and so there became pressure, an attacks on infantry attack on the right flank. Meanwhile, this artillery pounding away. By 9:30, Getty knew, okay, we got to retreat. Getty, by the way, he went there with no orders from anybody. He just thought this was the right place to be, and he was correct. this action, what did he gain from this, making this stand? Well, time, at least an hour extra to allow the rest of the army to form a battle line up around here somewhere and to sort out their troops into the correct units, and then maybe get some stragglers back and get ready for the next attack. And also, well, Getty inflicted a lot of casualties on the enemy. The Confederate attack had really slowed down, maybe starting 7:30. By 9:30, it lost a lot of steam, partly because of the casualties, partly because these guys had marched all night and fought for hours. They'd been on low rations for weeks. And there was another factor going on here as well. And oops, I should be getting good at this by now, but I'm not. Plundering and straggling. Okay. Let me read you a quote from, from Theodore Marr, who wrote the most detailed book on the Battle of Cedar Creek. And he said that by about 6:30 in the morning, 6:30, quote, although the Yankee bullets could not stop the Confederate onslaught, the Yankee food and equipment scattered throughout Thoburn's camp began to do just that. Okay, so these guys, their clothes were full of holes. They were ragged. They came into these camps of the Army of West Virginia, and they found clothing, they found blankets, food, and they gathered these things up. Now, again, there was a tremendous fog that morning, which really worked in the rebels' favor, right? Because when you're attacking, the fog kind of made a surprise attack. It worked in their favor, but in this way, it worked against them, because imagine that a fella just stepped out of line to gather supplies for 10 minutes. Meanwhile, his companies moved on in the fog. How's he going to find them? Again, by 9:30, their lines were very thinned out for all those reasons, and the attack kind of slowed down. So by about 10 o'clock, the battle lines were formed. Now, this is the north end of Middletown, and here's this road, and the rebels were had this battle line like here. The Yankees were, this was maybe 3/4 of a mile. This is maybe a mile. And both sides were kind of getting their lines to, getting their units sorted out. And then something dramatic happened. Sheridan returned. Sheridan had been called to Washington by Stanton, and on October 17th, he met all day with Stanton and presumably with others. And then the morning of the 18th, they met a little more. And then Sheridan and his staff returned to the valley to Winchester around 4 p.m. on the 18th. Sheridan had some business to take care of in Winchester, in that area, which he did that evening. And then he decided, just to sleep in Winchester. Around, somewhere between 8 and 8:30 in the morning, one of his staff members woke him up and said, it sounds like there's some kind of cannon fire coming from up the valley. And they got out, went out, they got on their horses, started just walking up the pike. And it became very obvious from the sounds that it was a real battle, not just some skirmishing. And furthermore, it sounded like the sounds of the firing were moving north, which was bad for them. That meant the Union was in retreat, right? So they started running. It's about 12 miles from Winchester to that battle line, that Union battle line I showed you. And after a while, they started to encounter some stragglers. And a lot of these men just seem to regain their martial spirit just seeing Sheridan. Some of these men wrote later on, they said it was like an electric shock went through us, that just seeing him, listening to his confident voice. I know that sounds like some Hollywood plot or something, but it really happened. And as he got closer, he started to encounter some officers, William Emery, for example, who said, don't worry, boss. We have this situation under control. We have a good defensive line. I think we can hold. If we have to, we can retreat a little and then hold another defensive line. We're not in any grave danger now. And Sheridan said, forget defense. Okay, we are going to attack early. We're going to drive them up the valley. You guys are going to sleep in your camps tonight, the same ones you slept in last night. This is what he's telling them. I don't know if he really believed it, but it sounded good, right? So, and it really did inspire these guys. Now, the other thing about these stragglers, a lot of them weren't even that wounded, or not. Some of them not wounded at all. Some of them were sitting around in the grass. I mean, they weren't even moving, and so he got. I'm not saying he got them all, but he got a lot of them to head up the valley and get back in the fight. So around 10:30, he arrived to the battle lines. He rode back and forth across the line to show himself to the men, and they cheered. Men were cheering. These guys weren't that far away. They could hear the cheering. They didn't know that Sheridan had returned. None of them knew he'd even been gone. And certainly Jubal Early and Jed Hotchkiss didn't know. And Wharton did not know. I can say that for a fact. There's no evidence that any of the others knew. So they heard this cheering. They think whatever this is, it's not good for us, right? Maybe the Union was just reinforced with a division, maybe a corps. They were reinforced. They were reinforced, but it was just one soldier, and that made a big difference. So anyhow, they continued. Early continued to advance, and they got up to this Miller Lane by about 1 o'clock. The Union line did not move during that period, but the rebels advanced. So now they're closer to. Now they're closer together. And see, along Miller Lane was a sequence of stone walls, which allowed for for good defensive. They could protect themselves there. And there was intermittent skirmishing, but it was really pretty quiet till about 4 p.m., which is when Sheridan ordered the attack all along the line. Custer was not involved initially, but this is the 11th Corps here. Sheridan was with them. I mean, at this point, Emory really wasn't directing the operations of the 19th Corps. It was really Sheridan. He was kind of micromanaging things here. And he was also in close contact with Custer. The 6th Corps, Horatio Wright, was in charge here. On the right of the pike, I think it's interesting, you had Merritt's cavalry attacking a frontal attack against infantry. You had Wharton's division and Wooford's brigade. They're from Kershaw's division. And they probably had about an equal number of men on each side there, east of the pike. Now, ordinarily, when cavalry would attack infantry in a frontal way, roughly equal numbers, not only that, but the infantry had hours to get ready for the attack. Usually that didn't work out too well for the cavalry, right? But this time, Merritt really held his own. And I think the difference was that most of these guys had 7-shot Spencer carbines. They dismounted and they went out on foot with these carbines. So even if they were a little outnumbered, they had more firepower. Now, there's no question they suffered a lot of casualties, but they inflicted a lot too. There was heavy fighting all along this line. The 6th Corps lost a lot of men. The 19th Corps, again, these stone walls made a difference. If you read a cursory description of this battle, it'll say something like, well, maybe they'll describe in detail somewhat the Southern attack, the rebel attack in the morning, but then they'll say, and then Sheridan showed up and then they just pushed Early away. It wasn't like that at all. This was a hard battle. It was a difficult fight. Eventually, they made the 19th Corps made some progress against the left flank, and that was only made possible with a sort of a desperate bayonet charge as well. And they started to turn the left flank, and then the entire line backed up somewhat. Oops. They backed up down to here. Well, this wasn't as good a defensive position. They didn't have those stone walls, for one thing. And also, the left was a little not as well anchored in this position. Sheridan, as Early backed up, Sheridan pursued. It just moved forward, and the battle just continued. And again, it was the left that gave out. The infantry started to turn the left, and when that happened, just when these guys started to bend here a little, Sheridan unleashed Custer, who hadn't really been part of this battle up until this point. And so all these well-armed men on well-fed horses came attacking the left and threatening the rear, and then a very strange thing happened. These Gordon's division and Kershaw's, they just fled. They just broke and ran, every man for himself. These were veteran soldiers for the most part. In the official reports of some of these officers on this side, they said that the enemy just fled all of a sudden. They weren't really sure why. And I'm sure there's a lot of factors, the fatigue, the hunger. But let me read this is from Captain D. Augustus Dickert, who commanded the 3rd South Carolina Regiment in Kershaw's division. Years later, he wrote, quote, "A soldier in battle will leave his ranks and fly to the rear with no other reason than that he saw others doing the same. The stampede of Early was uncalled for, unnecessary, and disgraceful, and I willingly assume my share of the blame and the shame." Okay. I think he was a little hard on himself because in addition to all these other factors, Captain Dickert was only 18 years old at the time of this battle. Okay. Early's army was so depleted of officers that he had 18-year-olds out there commanding regiments. Now, how are they supposed to maintain discipline? Just a thought. So anyhow, Ramser's men held out a little longer, maybe about another 15 minutes. But then when Ramser was mortally wounded, and then they gave it up also, and also just stampeded off the field. At some point, these men east of the Pike did that as well. So then all the infantry were fleeing in just total disorder. And then Custer's division came swooping down this way, and Merritt's down this way. There was a long wagon train of Confederate supplies, and that's what they were after. Now some of these cavalrymen did go after and capture some infantrymen, but a lot of those guys escaped that were captured because it was getting dark, and these were cavalry. They were trying to hold on to them, and they were really after the wagons. That's what Sheridan wanted them to do. In the morning, it's estimated that 23 guns were captured by the rebels, and along with caissons, and 23, and that every single one of those guns was recaptured during this time period. Furthermore, about 22 guns that the Confederates had brought into the battle were also captured at this time. Again, with all kinds of other supplies. There was food in these wagons, some food that they captured in the morning, some food they brought with them, ambulances, wagons of all types. And by 8 p.m. it was over. The battle was over. Early's men camped again. They reassembled on Fisher's Hill where they'd started the battle. And the Sheridan's infantry were camped along in their camps that they'd slept in the night before along the north bank of Cedar Creek, exactly as Sheridan had told them they would do. So in the let's look at the guns here. I think this graphic here tells you a lot about the battle in a thumbnail description. Before the battle started, Sheridan had a pretty big lead in artillery. I mean, these numbers may be off, but they're not off by much. By 10 a.m., wasn't that different. By 7 p.m., well, it was overwhelmingly in favor of Sheridan, right? Okay, so how do I get rid of this thing? Doesn't matter, I guess. Oh, come on, don't do that. Oh, it just closes itself. Okay, so, let's look at the aftermath of the battle. Again, Early's army reassembled here, and they went to sleep, but he only let them sleep about 3 hours. Woke them up and marched them up to the New Market area. Okay. Now, on the 20th, so the battle was all on the 19th. On the 20th, some federal cavalry was looking around in here. Now, remember, the battle was up in here, right? And they found in this area, say up in this area, a number of muskets had just been discarded, Confederate muskets, right? And some haversacks. It's understandable, right? These guys were running away from horsemen, trying to run as fast as they could. Some of them threw their weapons away. But then on the next day, on the 21st, okay, so remember, Early's guys were all down here at New Market. On the 21st, they found in these Piedmont areas, some of the back roads, they also found a significant number of muskets. That's a little harder to explain, right? Because these men were walking. They weren't running. Nobody was chasing them. Now, why would a soldier just discard his musket there? The only thing I can think is he was deserting. And there is no question there was a lot of desertions during these days from Early's army. A lot of these guys lived in the valley in his army. Like maybe they were, wanted to go back and see with the burning and all, want to see what their families were doing, where they were, and if they could be of some use to their families. But anyhow, it was my point is, this was a very demoralized, broken army. And to give one more illustration of that, so when they got back to New Market, several units were ordered to do picket duty. This is normal. And one of those units was the 6th Alabama. So they were ordered to do picket duty. Only 6 men from that regiment obeyed the order. The rest of them just ignored it. Now, I can't say for sure how many men were in that 6th Alabama over here at that time, but 84 of the men of that regiment surrendered at Appomattox. So I don't know. I think it's reasonable to assume that they probably had at least 84 here at this time. Anyhow, 6 of them obeyed the order, and those 6 men started walking north a little bit, and they laid down on the ground, and they slept all night. Okay, so this is what sentinels did for this army. This was a very broken army. There was never again any significant Confederate activity in the valley after the Battle of Cedar Creek. There were maybe a little bit of raiding here and there, but there were really no more battles. So let's see. Back to our chart here, which showed the. Why doesn't that pick up? Come on. This is so annoying. Summerall, you think I'm better doing it this way? No, that didn't do anything at all. Okay, try this. Oh, for God's sakes. Oh, there we go. That's good enough. Well, not quite. Okay, now it's good. Okay, so you see our chart of the battles here. There's nothing after Cedar Creek. And so following that through November, most of Early's troops were withdrawn to the Richmond, Petersburg area. And then most of Sheridan's troops were withdrawn. The 19th Corps, well, half of them went to Savannah, Georgia, right after the New Year. Let's see, the 6th Corps, somewhere in December, they went back to the Army of the Potomac. Half of Crook's men went to the Army of the James. It was all over here, right? But Early was still left on March 2nd, 1865. He still had about, well, estimates are 1,200 to 1,500 infantrymen. There were two brigades from Gabriel Wharton's division, and they were camped around Waynesboro. They had a little bit of cavalry there with them. And it was a cold, rainy night. It had been raining for days, and the area around here was very swampy. And Custer came in and surprised them in the dark and riding through, splashing through this mud. Custer's men showed up, just covered head to toe in mud. And you know he hated that because he was so fussy about his clothing. And they just went in and basically captured almost all the infantry, at least 1,200 prisoners. And somehow Wharton and Early got away. And that's the epilogue to our story. So now I do have some open questions. This comes from all those years of being a mathematician. We always have open questions, otherwise it's not interesting, right? So these are things that nobody knows the answer to. Gosh darn it. Okay, first of all, let's go. Why didn't I didn't talk much about Powell's cavalry, right? They were somewhere east of the Pike. Why didn't they guard the fords a little bit of the North Fork? As Crook had, on the morning of the 18th, Crook got nervous about his left flank. And he asked Horatio Wright, who was at that point in charge of the army because Sheridan was out of town, he asked him if he could get some cavalrymen from Powell to come down and guard those forts. I mean, those fords. At least they could sound an alarm, or if they see movement there, but they could probably slow down the movement as well. This is a mystery because apparently Wright thought that was a good idea, and I suppose he had to get the order to Tobert, who was the head of the cavalry corps, who had to get the order to Powell. Somewhere the communication broke down, and that order was never executed. Another question is, what was Lomax's cavalry division doing all day? Complete mystery. Presumably they were east of the Pike somewhere, but yeah. And number 3, what was Pegram's infantry doing before 8 a.m.? Well, again, a lot of those men went and attacked Cemetery Hill, but they don't appear to have been engaged in the battle before that. According to Jeffrey Wirt, historian Jeffrey Wirt, it was a critical mistake on somebody's part that Pegram wasn't involved in this battle earlier. For example, what if Pegram had got the idea to go up on Cemetery Hill 30 minutes earlier than he actually did? Then he would have got there before Getty. This battle would have turned out very differently. So anyhow, those are the open questions. Maybe you have some questions, open or closed. So, yes.
What would you say is like the turning point for the Union, like when they changed the offense?
Well, it must have been Sheridan's return because the senior command wasn't even thinking about attacking before he got there. Now, it's a good question because what would have happened if they didn't play offense? What would have happened Now, John Gordon claimed for the rest of his life that Early made a big mistake by around 9:30 to 10 o'clock by slowing down. He called it the fatal halt. Okay, anybody ever heard that with regard to this battle? And this was a controversy, and I don't know. I don't think that the Confederates were in a position. I don't think they were in enough good shape. Even if they were going to attack, it would have taken a few hours to resort their lines and get their stragglers back. So I think he was wrong about that, Gordon. But a lot of people, especially Confederates, sided with Gordon for a long time on this issue. I don't know. I think in part because people really hated Jubal Early. You know, I mean, I didn't realize till just this week how much. A few years ago, a large collection of letters were written between Gabriel Wharton and his wife, wartime letters, and it's been recently published. Makes for great reading. And one of the things in there that comes out so clearly was the contempt that he had for Early and the pure hatred. He kept saying that, how much he hates this mean-spirited, imbecile. I mean, just on and on and on. And so, yeah, they wanted to believe that this loss was Early's fault. A lot of people. But anyhow, another idea, and this was, Scott Patchen has said this. Okay, so maybe Gordon wanted to keep advancing. Early wanted to slow down, to stop there where he did. Patchen says Early should have retreated. Okay, should have gone back to Fisher's Hill, got all this plunder, got it, in some place where they could protect it, and called it a day, because they would have had this magnificent victory. There's the embarrassment that they wanted to. He done enough, and he should have. He sort of stopped somewhere in no man's land. He should have backed up. I think that's kind of a persuasive argument by Scott Patchen. But other questions? Yes.
What were the numbers, Confederate versus Union?
That you see a lot of different estimates of that. The Union definitely had an advantage in infantry, although the estimates vary wildly. See, one of the problems for historians is that Early's army, they didn't have many inspections. There weren't many times when they went and counted people. Furthermore, one of the reasons for all these open questions here, like 2 and 3, they didn't file many reports, official report, or if they did, they got lost. I don't know. But if you look at the official reports, okay, of Early's 5 infantry divisions, there's only 1 official report out of those 5 divisions. Out of this 17 infantry brigades, there's only 3. So we don't really know a lot about their numbers, but they probably had maybe a 4-3 advantage in infantry. I'm just guessing. Other people have other guesses. The big advantage for the Union was cavalry. They had more men. They were better trained. They were better armed. Their horses were better fed. I mean, Lomax's division, for instance. These guys, most of them they were carrying Enfields, like the same guns same rifles that the muskets that the infantry was carrying, with the 39-inch barrels, muzzle loading. Can you imagine loading one of those things on a horse? These were not appropriate weapons. And, again, more than half of the Sheridan's cavalry had Spencer carbines. The other had some Sharps breech-loading carbines or something like it. A lot of them had sabers, and a lot of them had Colt revolvers or something like those as well. So they were better armed, they were better trained, and they were better led. Why was Lomax even ahead of a division? Well, because Fitz-Lee had been badly injured at the Third Battle of Winchester, and that was a big drop-off. And also, a lot of it goes to the top as well. Sheridan didn't like his cavalrymen, and they didn't like him. He had contempt for them, especially after the Battle of Tom's Brook. There was all this finger-pointing between him and Rosser about whose fault the whole thing was, and there was just really bad feelings. Yeah, I know Sheridan, people have different opinions about his skills. But I think one thing everyone can agree on, he was able to use cavalry in a battle better than anyone. I mean, who's that guy, a Kid from the Michigan Brigade of Cavalry? Yeah, he said that. He said nobody could integrate cavalry and infantry into a battle plan like Sheridan. And that was he used very much to advantage at the Third Battle of Winchester as well as at Cedar Creek. So they had better leadership all the way down. They better numbers, and their horses. I mean, they were not well fed. After this burning. By the way, the men weren't so well fed either. A lot of them referred to Fisher's Hill, the 16th, 17th, 18th, as camp starvation. Okay, so I mean, and by the way, the burning. It's not nice to think about this, but the burning was really a very important act militarily, because the flow of food to the Army of Northern Virginia slowed to a trickle almost immediately. And there wasn't that much left over for Early's army as well. Yes?
Ken, if you don't mind, I would like to read, you mentioned the stand of the Vermont.
Yes.
On the ridge, in about 15 minutes. I think the monument that the regiment put up there was put up 20 years after the battle, so it was pretty early. The first time I went to Cedar Creek to tour it, you weren't allowed to get to that monument because it was all on private property. There was no way to get there, no even access to the created by a state or anything like that. Now you can get there. Much, especially the southern 2/3 of the battlefield, is preserved. There's 4 different organizations that have done it. Cedar Creek Battlefield Foundation, the National Park Service, the American Battlefield Trust, and the Shenandoah Valley Battle Foundation. So lots of it has been preserved, which is great. But they put a monument up there, and there's a picture of it I showed you. It's in Vermont Stone there, and it says the 8th Vermont Volunteers, General Stephen Thomas, yeah,
was the brigade, yeah.
Advanced across the pike the morning of October 19, 1864, engaged the enemy near and beyond this point, and before sunrise, lost killed and wounded 110 men, 3 color bearers were shot down, and 13 out of 16 commissioned officers. Whole number of men engaged, 184. So they lost 110 men out of 184. And this is not, like a lot of people think high-numbered regiments like that. Vermont wasn't a big state. They think a high-numbered regiment wasn't, was a late war regiment. These guys were veterans. They had spent 3 years. They were in the 19th Corps. They had spent a lot of their time down in Louisiana and Arkansas.
They're in the Red River campaign.
Yeah, and before in the Tesh campaign. Things like that. So they were a very experienced unit, and they did a great job there. That monument there is one of the most spectacular monuments you'll ever see. If you ever get down to Middletown and have a chance to get out there, take that walk there. The trail goes along, follows their route that they had to go through. They had to go around this big pond and everything else. It's pretty spectacular.
In fact, I didn't bring a picture of the monument, but it's smooth on the front where the words are, and it's rough cut on the other 3 sides. And I think the sculptor's idea was that they were being attacked on 3 sides. That's why they made it that way. And there aren't a whole lot of monuments on this battlefield. I think there may be one where Charles Russell Lowell got killed. I don't know. There's others. Yes.
Just to add on to Jamie's monument thing, by the way, it's really cool if you're with a guide doing the Shenandoah Valley, especially if you're doing stuff about the burning. They will point out a lot of foundations, because there's still a ton of them around, of barns and houses, mostly grist mills and barns that were burned during the burning. Burning was a huge event.
Huge event.
Absolutely.
There's actually another burning late in November. Sheridan's men, what was left of them, because most of them had been taken away. They burnt the Loudon Valley to some extent, because they felt that's where a lot of Mosby's Rangers were getting their food from, and feeding their horses from. It was a smaller scale event, but Um, yeah. Well, yes.
Forgive me if this sounds like a silly question,
Oh.
because I'm not by any means a Civil War expert. I'm
Go
just
ahead,
kind of
go ahead.
starting to
I'm not an expert either.
dip
Yeah,
my toe
yeah,
in, but,
yeah.
you mentioned that, some of the men were likely deserting or
Mhm.
going back to their homes or trying to find family members or things like that. How often did that happen in terms of where people were fighting or stationed close to home? Because that sounds like that could be a huge factor. And
Yeah, I mean, I think all the Valley fighting, all through the war, I think there were always a lot of people from Western Virginia involved in that. I'm not sure I understood the question, but
just whether or not soldiers were like stationed close to home.
Yes, there was a lot.
yeah, I mean, I would think
There was a lot.
like,
Especially later in the war.
yeah. I wonder if anybody studied these farmers that left the Valley. Where did they go? I don't know, Maryland, Pennsylvania, West Virginia. I don't know. Where did they go? And what percent of them ever came back? I mean, I don't know first of all, I don't know if anyone's ever studied that. And secondly, I don't know if it's possible, if there's material to even figure these things out to some extent. But I mean, I wonder how long it took for the agriculture in that region to rebound. Yes,
The Wharton you mentioned,
Gabriel Wharton, yeah.
that's Gabriel?
Yes,
Okay, so you relation to John?
I don't know.
Just wondered.
Uh,
I thought it might be John.
but these letters between he and his wife, they're just makes such good reading. It's just, and again, they're just in the last decade were just accidentally discovered, by one of Wharton's descendants. For example, on the 21st of October, he wrote to his wife. He's telling her about the battle of Cedar Creek 2 days after the battle, and he said, "Yeah, well, okay, so we really gave it to them in the morning, but then they were in the afternoon. They were heavily reinforced, and we got defeated." That was his summary. So even 2 days after the battle, he didn't realize. When I said that nobody knew, the Confederates didn't know Sheridan had been gone, they thought some reinforcement. Even 2 days after the battle, a fairly high-ranking officer didn't know. He didn't realize what they were up against there. He thought maybe some big, some big new reinforcements came in, which didn't happen. Yeah.
What made you want to study this battle so intensely?
Well, I think I was just poking around on the internet and I saw this book, Theodore Marr's book on this battle, and it, I guess on eBay, somebody wanted I don't know, $800 for it or something. So I figured this must be a really good book, right? I'll say you read it too.
Pretty rare.
Yeah. And so, okay, so there's at least one person in the audience who would have been pretty upset if I spent $800 on this book. So I did find one on eBay for $50. All right. So meticulously reading that book several times, and then I started looking at some original sources, and I guess it was that book that got me going on it. Yeah. Oh, another little thing that happened. When the cavalry, swooped in on those wagons, one of those wagons was an ambulance that had Stephen Dodson Ramser in the back. Okay. And, these Civil War ambulances were nothing but a wagon with a tent, right? And so some cavalrymen came up to the driver of this ambulance and said, "Who do you got in there?" And the guy said, "The general told me not to tell anyone." So anyhow, they looked in there, they saw his Ramser, he was still alive, and they hastened him to the Belle Grove plantation. So, by the way, some of the older sources call this not the Battle of Cedar Creek, but the Battle of Belle Grove. It was sort of the big house in that area. And they hastened to there, which was a makeshift hospital. Did all they could for him, and they couldn't save him. But during that night after the battle, Custer, sat with him quite a bit. They had been buddies at West Point. And also Charles DuPont had been friends with him at West Point. He sat up with him. Just Sheridan came in a couple times to pay his respects, but then he died. Yeah. So, yes.
And one more point of, I guess, tangible evidence of the Battle of Cedar Creek. So Ken mentioned that Rutherford B. Hayes was commanding a division there. Hayes was actually wounded and left by his men. He
Right.
asked his staff officers to leave him there
Yeah.
themselves. He was captured. He was later recaptured.
Well, was he captured at Cedar Creek?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, because I knew that. I think his horse was shot and it kind of fell in it, and he was limping because the horse kind of rolled onto his ankle. But I didn't know he was actually captured.
But he was recaptured later that day. So
Yeah.
he didn't spend the night captured. But if you go to the Hayes house in Fremont, Ohio today, Steeple Row, upstairs, they restored it to like the 1880s version of what the house was like. And so in his bedroom there's a closet, and you can see they will allow you to open the closet. It has all his suits and all his uniforms, including his Cedar Creek uniform, which he has his blood on it.
Wow.
So
Oh, that's pretty cool. Where is that? Where is
in
that?
Fremont, Ohio.
Fremont. Okay. Oh, speaking of future presidents, so remember I said that Sheridan rode back and forth across the line, showing himself to the men. Well, in Sheridan's memoirs, he said that this young captain on Crook's staff, William McKinley, suggested that he do that. Okay. So there you have McKinley and Hayes, were, I think both came from the 23rd Ohio Infantry, and both became governors of Ohio and presidents of the United States. Anyhow, yes.
So you have the burning, about the same time you had Sherman marching through Georgia. Any indication that you know of that this was becoming a national strategy?
Well,
Just two instances.
I mean, it wasn't Sheridan's idea. Grant told him to do it. In fact, Grant had told David Hunter to do it. But David Hunter got really carried away and started burning people's houses, burning libraries.
Yeah.
You know, the Virginia Military Institute. No, and plus he wasn't very successful militarily, so he wasn't able to really get at much of the valley. But Grant had ordered Sheridan to do that. Now, the ante just kept getting raised because after Hunter burnt the VMI in private homes, I mean, there were women leaving these homes with like big armloads of dresses, and he insisted that no, you can't take those dresses. We're going to burn those. Like like that's some kind of military thing, dresses, and books in a library. But so anyhow, after that, that's when Early decided that they got to pay him back, and that's when they went up to Chambersburg and said, you have to give us, I think they said 100,000 in gold or 500,000 in greenbacks, take your pick, or we're going to burn the town to the ground. Well, they wound up burning the town to the ground. So then I think, some of the places they burnt, in Sheridan's burning here, they, there were found some things that said, Chambersburg, like this is revenge for Chambers. So the ante kept getting raised. But in terms of this concept of destroying the civilians' ability to produce food, I mean, that was going on in Mississippi, in Grant and Sherman were doing it. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Well, I'm just basically asking, did orders come from on high?
Well, I don't know if they came from Washington, but they certainly came from Grant. Yeah, there's no question about it. Yeah. Okay, I guess that's it.
All right, thanks very much.
Yeah.
Mike, who's our speaker next month?
Daryl Smith.
Daryl Smith.
This topic yet to be decided. It'll probably be something on Perryville or Fort Donaldson.
Okay, great.